In this video, I'm going to be showing off some techniques around generative music, specifically using MIDI and MIDI instruments in Ableton Live. I made a video which was overviewing what generative music is, a little introduction. You can go check that out on this channel. There'll be a link on the description as well. But I want to go over some of the specific techniques. So to start, I've got these two clips. And if I double click, we've got this clip here in the MIDI editor. This is a single note. I'm going to just put it to fold, right? Just a single note. But if I press play on there, we're getting more than just a single note. That's because of my combination of effects that I have right before the instrument. These are all MIDI effects. And if I had play this one, this is more like a melody. So let me show how and why I started to set that up. First thing, I'm going to just delete all these effects so we have a single note. Not a lot going on. Now the first thing I'd like to do is go over to my MIDI effects, and then in here I'm going to make a random note. So to go to my MIDI effects, then I come over to random, and I can drag this in, and it's going to make a random note. Now the chances of the random note is right here. Choices, how many choices of notes we have, and the scale, which basically how high up or low will it go. There's some really nice ones in here, like we've got jazz again, low, some good presets to start. So I'm going to turn that chance way up. So that's the start of what I'm doing. After this, I might want to do something like make sure it's in the same scale. So I'm going to go to my scales. If I just drag it in, this means every note being played is the note that is being passed on into this audio effect, into this instrument. But if I change this, for instance, like that, every note is now that note. It's all being forced into that single note. Great thing is if we have a preset like the major scale, it has the same whole half, all the way up preset, and then this is now C major. But if I move my bass, I can go to E major or whatever I want. So let's put in C minor and put it to G minor. Now, next up is an arpeggiator. Because right now we're only randomizing that single note, but I might want it something more like, if I were to copy this over, see now we have a lot more movement. I could do this by the MIDI itself, which is a fun way of doing it. But I can also just make it a single note and then come in with an arpeggiator. And the arpeggiator style defines if it goes up every single time, down, whatever it might be. And we have all these other parameters. So we have the distance, which is very similar to the choices over here in the scale. And the steps. So you can change the speed of this. Let's go with 1/8 on this. And just to give an example, let's change these styles. Now me personally, I like to have the scale right after it. I like to have the scale as close to this instrument as possible to make sure everything is locked into that scale. And then the last thing that I usually like to do is change the velocity. Now the velocity is basically how hard we press a note. Usually this is mapped to the volume control. And in this case, I want to kind of change that because right now we're staying at the same note over and over and over. It's kind of boring, but we're trying to get this cool morphing randomized sound out of this. What I might do is go to my random and see this gray range is basically how much range if a note lands here, like halfway in between light and hard, it might actually move randomly up or down from that. Now you can see this little yellow dot up here is hitting always at the same spot, but then over here it's going up and down. Well, that's because this is velocity in and this is velocity out. I can also do things like say, I want all the notes to be light, or all the notes to be hard, but random within that range. Or I can even curve it. You get pretty strong control over things this way. Now that's great, but the only thing that I might want to do on top of this is make sure that I have still moments where there isn't a note playing. I can actually do that by putting velocity in here and changing my lowest right here, which is basically saying if it's quieter than this, just turn it off. I'm going to get rid of that drive amount just to make sure we get some low end ones. And just slightly change this so we're more likely to get some low end. Now if it's lower than 89, so the range is basically 89 to 127, it'll play the note. If it's not, it will just skip that note. We could also put gate on, which means it will only play those notes. And I can raise this. So we still get those randomized holes, but we got more notes in there. So that's how I would make that melody, right? And this can be a really cool idea of let's just move this around to random notes. Zoom out. What I might want to do, now one thing I might want to do is record this to really pick those melodies or sounds that I'm getting out of it. And what I would do is set up a MIDI return. So I'll go to my IOs, make sure that this is MIDI from, and I can say acoustic bells, put it to in. Now, if I arm it, press this, it's going to record all those notes. And we'll get those different patterns here, and I can go ahead and edit them if I want by, I'll just put it into fold, come in here, I could delete some, I could double them, and begin to create whatever I want from that generated melody. Now let's look at how I had two going. This is when things start getting interesting. Now to start to cheat, I'm just going to grab these three. I'm going to put them in here for this guy. Let's solo this. Let's have this down. The scale we're going to have really low. And let's even change this to a fourth. Now what I want to do here is add a lower chord to it. So if I grab the chord, put that in here. If you look at these presets, we have all these different ones like fifth chords and so on. So I'm going to drag in a fifth, which means it's going to take that first note and then raise it up by a seventh. But I can also bring it down by a third. You can see we're getting these chordal movements now. starting to get something that's pretty interesting. Now, right now, we're capturing the MIDI, but there's one more thing I could do. If I wanted to, I can insert an audio track, and I can record this as audio instead of MIDI, which could be useful. So I'm going to set this to input from, let's do glass piano, record. Great, now we're recording just that piano, and I can go in and edit these little glitches if I found one that I really liked. And there's another thing we could do, which is just resampling everything. So I'm going to set this to audio from resampling, which means everything we hear over the main output is going to be recorded. So it's as if it's recording all three of these sounds into this one track. Now, what might be useful with this is I can just let this run for a little while and then go through and pick the exact sounds that I really liked. Like I might like one moment here and one moment there and splice them together. Now, the more randomization you add like this, the more you're going to have to go in and edit it afterwards. That's really important. Otherwise, it's going to sound just too random. We want it a certain type of random, right? Like an interesting kind of random. But you might come up with new melodies or kind of a backing texture that you might not have otherwise. And if you wanted to, you can always come in here and we can just completely change things by as simply as changing the bass. So let's change the bass to E. I have to do this on each one of them. Now let's play it. I'm going to record that. I'm going to rename this one G minor, and this one is E minor. Let's go to auto so we can hear these now. So here we've got the G minor version, and then let's move to the E minor. Even that might be the seed of a cool new idea. So there you go. That is using generative melody, using all the different MIDI effects within Ableton Live that come with, I think it's intro, suite, and standard, so all of them have it. You can go ahead and throw these in here and begin to affect your instrument and really create a new thing that you might not ever have thought of. Now, we did this by using these three different ideas: randomization. We used different MIDI effects to create randomization, but we also had other MIDI effects to create logical constraints, like the MIDI scale, the note range, things like that, that really limit it so we're getting a type of sound that we want out of it. And lastly, which is the important part, is editing, really going in and picking the sounds and ideas that you liked the most out of that. And that way, I really view this as collaborating with the machine, collaborating with randomization to come up with ideas that can break you out of, let's say you got writer's block or something. Well, just throw random stuff out until something captures you and then build from there, and you'll be amazed what comes out of that. And also, it's a new sound that you might not have made otherwise. There you go. That's some generative music techniques for you guys. I've got a whole bunch more videos on this in the fast songwriting course. I've got a few more on different Macs for Live devices and clip launching and things that I like to use for generative music, as well as how to speed up your curriculum with fast songwriting in Ableton Live. I go over things like file management, creating templates, new instruments, getting ready in the production, building out your sketches, compositions, you name it. Tons of information to keep you efficient. So check it out at subaqueousmusic.com. There'll be a link in this video description, and happy to give you guys some new ideas.